this morning, and I think everybody...
Can you just translate what was written there? I couldn't read it.
I translated it. And I heard that the Chinese was correct.
Okay.
But I can't pronounce it. The problem is, as we heard from Axel, that we are lagging behind with red list assessment. So, as we all know, insect diversity in tropical forests is high. There were these guesstimates of overall animal diversity oscillated between 30 million and 80 million. Calculations made on fogging experiments in the tropics, and this elicited a decade-long discussion, which finally, when the dust settled down, everybody agreed that there will be about maybe 5 million species on Earth, a big chunk of them insects, particularly beetles, and from there results a ratio of described versus undescribed species of 1 to 3. Be that as it may, we know that there are many undescribed species around in tropical forests, and how can Orthoptera be adequately monitored or red listed if many species don't even have a name or descriptions are based on singletons? So even if you go into the original taxonomic descriptions particularly from tropical species, then you often find only known by one specimen, only known by the male, or only known by the female. From this lack of information, or from this scarcity of information, particularly, you could immediately say data deficient, or you could even immediately say critically endangered, particularly if it hadn't been refound. So the other thing with Orthoptera is that they do produce sounds. So their sounds are easily to be heard, and they are much more easily to be heard than to be seen, particularly in tropical forests, and even more so in nocturnal tropical forests. So, from these calculations of high numbers, you come to unknown extinction rates. Of course, if we don't know the species, we don't know how many go extinct, and particularly endangered are the endemics. So basically, it cooks down to what was nicely phrased by Ethel on a recent paper on endemics in global ecology and biogeography, that probably many of the endemic species will be extinct before they are described. And this is what is generally communicated by WWF and IUCN to the general public, that so many species per day are going extinct, but actually we don't know exactly how many. So Ethel, in this very informative paper, calculated from description rates of endemics that still 10% of the European endemic Orthoptera remain to be discovered. So if there are still 10% of European species to be discovered, you can imagine how many will be there in the tropics. So the outline of my talk is how can acoustic profiling help and accelerate species discovery and monitoring. And then I will speak a little bit about the necessary database infrastructure which is needed to manage all this information, particularly sound archives and machine-based algorithms for sound recognition. Without that, we will not make progress. Then, as a third point, I will speak about the new development of automatic recording units, which are invading now all kinds of habitats and which are collecting soundscape data on a large scale. From there, I will go to mention some threatened target species and habitats and give some examples for the application of the method. And finally, I will end up with a proposal to integrate Orthoptera habitats into the Alliance for Zero Extinction site map. I I will explain what that is in a minute. So acoustic profiling, I think I don't need to explain much the vision. You know that very morphologically, very similar species like this Orthoptera here do have different songs, and these different songs were used as a taxonomic feature since the 1950s when oscilloscopes became available. For example, people like Busnell and so on, and then a lot of German researchers used this information to do behavioral studies, but also to describe and differentiate closely related species. And of course, species description and detection and the taxonomy is the first step for any assessment. We have to know what we assess. So it's needed for species presence absence detection, and it can also be used to determine species ranges and endemisms. And from there we can go to species monitoring on a more regular scale. If we implement a protocol, then it should be possible to measure species abundance, activity patterns, community patterns, extirpation rates at local habitats, and eventually species and habitat recovery successes, if there are any programs of management, as we have just heard. So the first example comes from a cricket species inventory at Barra Colorado Island, which we did in the project of Heiner Römer. The project itself was in another context. It was sensory ecology of cricket, so neuroecology, lab and field experiments. But the prerequisite for this project, which I think will be explained later on Friday in our acoustic session, was to make an inventory what is there on this small artificial island in Panama within the Gatun Lake. So this is a Smithsonian high-intensity research station where every tree is mapped and determined, and a lot of insects are inventoried. But even there, with the crickets, we have had some difficulties. There were nice studies from Heller from the 1920s, but even there, as you will see, there are some surprises. So this is the soundscape in Panama and Barra Colorado, 1 minute of soundscape, and here you have the frequency axis, and you see that here at the nocturnal or early evening community is mainly composed of crickets, where practically each frequency band represents one species. So if you filter these soundscapes for the respective frequency band, then you can isolate single species like this one here, which has a special rhythm and a special carrier frequency. And from there you can make oscillograms of all these different patterns you detect, and you get a sound library. And more than a sound library, we got a complete, more or less complete inventory by capturing species, specimens, taking them in captivity, and getting a relation between the song and the respective vulture specimen. So we could say more or less what it is, at least to the genus level. But as I will explain in a minute, there were some sound patterns left which we couldn't associate with the vulture specimens. And these songs, often songs which Holger Brown coined incognito sounds, are very important for the acoustic profiling. So first, we have the taxonomic impediment number 1. We have a song and we have a specimen, and we try to determine the specimen, but we end up with a genus because the exact determination with the available literature is not possible. So actually what is needed here is a new species description. But as we know, few people can do it. I couldn't do it for the cricket. So what you do is to assign it a code. So this code here was given by Mish in Ecuador, and of course you can database the images, the song, with the respective preliminary code. So this taxonomic impediment can be overcome at least by a preliminary code. So here you see some numbers for new Orthoptera, which are definitely new species from logging and sampling. But new species doesn't mean that they are really newly described already. So these are these kind of types of tomorrow which are still hanging around and waiting for description. And for example, Holger Braun in his 1998 dissertation is still describing the more than 50 new species he discovered there in Ecuador. And in brackets here you have the incognito sounds at the respective site, which couldn't be attributed to any collected larger specimen. So here are some examples of such an incognito sound collected by Holger, and maybe it belongs to this female here, but maybe not. This still has to be evaluated, so one could do a targeted approach and say, okay, we now want to collect these incognito sounds. But they are well-defined eco-species. They are well recognizable by their sound pattern, so you can map them. You even could assess them if they are rare or if they are endemic, everything. The only thing which would miss is the exact determination. So here are some more examples. So the earliest example of incognito sounds I found was in the groundbreaking study by Otter and Alexander about the Australian cricket fauna in 1983, where Otter and Alexander traveled all over Australia and actually detected crickets by sound. They write that they first listened and counted how many species, and then they collected. And that was more efficient than immediately collecting, where you stir up everything and finally you have a sample, but you don't know if it's complete. But still they write that they have 50 incognito sounds. So until today we don't know if these 50 incognito sounds have ever been described or not. The other ones I explained already, so only here with this simple analysis we found about 100 incognito sounds. Now the problem is that these incognito sounds are much more difficult to database than the types of tomorrow. The types of tomorrow, you have a preliminary species name, a code like the ANIC code for Australia, you have a number. With sounds alone, this is much more difficult, and I will now explain a little bit the available IT infrastructure we have, the sound archives we have, and the possible role of machine-based algorithms. So as Michael Samways mentioned this morning, we do have sounds in Orthoptera species file. I found 371 taxa. Of course, some taxa have more sounds. So in total, it must be around 500. And in SysTax, which is a result of our German inventory of what we have of songs and types in German museums from all over the world, we have approximately 10,000 songs from around 700 species. So these are now migrated with typical songs in OSF, but the SysTax manages raw data. So it has raw sound files with everything on it, with an announcement of the record list, etc. So here we have available about 10,000 songs, so that sounds good, but if you break it down to species, that you immediately see that it is still totally insufficient. And then the next question is, are these sound archives prepared for handling incognito sounds? So what is the vision? What do we want? We want upload an unknown song, which we have taped somewhere in the forest. We want to upload the whole song to the database, and then hopefully get an answer. Get a similar song, or even a determination. So this should be possible, because we know that for the iPad there are music recognition software like Shamaz or SoundTorch or so. So it should be computer and a good or well-organized database to find a song, uploading an example. And of course this tool would be very helpful, because then we could search if somebody else has taped one of Holger Brown's Ecuadorian incognito sounds, maybe in Colombia or maybe in Panama. And then we have an additional information where and what to search. So you immediately, those of you working with genetic sequences immediately see the analogy with a basic local alignment search tool, where you can upload a genetic or protein sequence to NCBI, and then the whole database is searched, and you get an answer of similar sequences. So we need something similar for bioacoustics. And to this end, we had an international workshop in the Museum König in the context of the Amigo project, which I explain in a minute, where we came together about 24 engineers, mostly engineers, one representative here from the Tierstimmenarchiv Berlin, Sound Archive Berlin, but the rest were all high-tech nerds, which were all interested in animal voices and automatic recognition. And I will present only one example of a very promising approach, and the talk was entitled Shooting Audio Recordings of Insects with a Shotgun Approach. So again, we have the analogy with genetic databases by Patrick Chater from the Zuse Institute, and I can't go into detail here, but he developed a very intelligent algorithm of pattern matching, where actually he transformed the pattern into another domain, into letters, into smaller symbols, which can be easily be searchable. So here, for example, we have our unknown sound. We send it up to the database, and his algorithm is then do a matching until he finds the best match, and then it spits out the answer. So something like this will be the way to go to administer these incognito sounds. So the other thing which the engineers said that they need are corpora. So what are corpora? Corpora are well known in linguistics. For example, you can have a speech corpus of Bavarian dialect vowels, or of a certain set of Chinese numbers or what, and the speech recognition people use these corpora to test their algorithms, and everybody is working on the same corpus. So this is very valuable, because you always have a reference corpus against which to test your algorithm. We don't have such a thing in bioacoustics. So we are now preparing the Systax database with a new interface. So this is already the new interface, and the corpus thing here is a mock-up where you have a shopping basket function, and you can compile your own corpus. For example, you could compile the corpus of Ecuadorian mountain forest tetigonids. Download it, define it, and make it available to other researchers. And then see what they can do with it in terms of automatic recognition. So, the way forward is species-specific songs of bush crickets and grasshoppers facilitate acoustic monitoring, that's for sure. Computer-based identification tools require well-curated databases. There we have some work to do. A framework for data house managing tool, managing sound corpora is under development. I think we will manage that in about 12 or 24 months. And then I have another proposal here that is also an analogy to gene databases, that obligatory submission of sound files is necessary together with publication of new species descriptions containing sounds. So, as you have to publish a sequence in a publicly accessible database, in the future you should publish a sound file which was used in species descriptions. And this, of course, would accelerate the completeness of our database. because in much lesser time we could accumulate a lot of information if we make the submission of sound files a prerequisite for a species description. Because otherwise this knowledge is fragmented. It will disappear as supplementary material behind the paywall, and we will have a lot of work to draw it into our databases. So now I come to my next point, the sound case from automatic recording units. So what is this? We have this in our acoustic monitoring of biodiversity project in Greece, which was a live project, live with the funding scheme for Natura 2000, European Natura 2000 research. And the basic idea is to have remote acoustic recording units in the field which transmit wireless to a central station, and the Greek partners were mainly engineers who were working on the sound recognition software. So this is the basic vision, and if you go to our website, you have a nice animated sequence of this scheme here where you get the basic idea. So this is the study area, the Hymettus area near Athens, the Natura 2000 site, under heavy human pressure of a multi-million city, but still there is nice habitat there in these mountains, and this is a rather huge area for European scales of 8,800 hectares. So here are the two types of automatic recording units. One wireless station, which is a little bit clumsy because it also has onboard detection schemes, and then a commercial song meter, which I have seen is also used in Brazil for cricket detection. So from there, a lot of data are transmitted. So we are now gathering data which are difficult to listen into because the length, the sheer length of the recordings is so long. So we have 13,600 hours of recordings which are practically impossible to screen manually. But still, with the help of volunteers, we managed to screen 10%, and we managed to select animal sounds from 460 insecta and nearly 10,000 aves. This only reflects the interest of the volunteers who were more interested in birds than in insects. I will listen to the thing now as I find the time, but there are probably more insect recordings in there. There are about 24 species at least of Orthoptera there, with one endemic species, the Pecilimonopropinus. Okay, we are not the only ones. Here you have another remote environment assessment laboratory. I think it is based in Illinois. I discovered this website recently, and they have soundscapes from all over the world. I picked out here one from Kenya, and you immediately recognize that there are some insects in these recordings besides of frogs. And there is another big project in Puerto Rico and Costa Rica which made it into the press, which is called Artimon, and they are even offering a software where you can mark up certain regions of interest. So here you can see the soundscape, and you see that searching for certain species is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So these big data pools is impossible to exploit without machine-based algorithms. So machine-based algorithms are making progress here. We have one for bird species detection, and our three colleagues recently developed an insect detector. Even a generic insect detector in this context would be very useful, but I'm sure that in a few years' time we will have the necessary algorithms, and then we have this huge pool of acoustic data collection stations which we can exploit. But again, it's a question of databases, because if this data gets fragmented, we might lose them and we might not be able to access them. So last point, where do target species and habitats come?